Broadcasting from Salisbury University campus, this is WSDL Ocean City, NPR News Talk 90.7. Putting Delmarva first. Stay tuned for Delmarva Today with your host, Don Rush.
Maryland State Senator Jim Mathias makes another bid in this November election. Welcome to Delmarva Today. This is Don Rush. It's never been easy for the former mayor of Ocean City when it comes to winning District 38. In 2014, he beat Republican challenger Mike McDermott 51% to 48. 2010, Mathias won the district with just over 50% against Republican Michael James, who garnered 49%. This year, he's being challenged by Delegate Mary Beth Carrozza. So how will he do this time? Well, we have the Eastern Shore Democrat in our studios this morning. Welcome to the program.
Morning, Don. Another beautiful day on Delmarva.
There you go. Well, one of the things, as a matter of fact, talk about the politics for a moment. So in the primary, you picked up about almost a little over 59,000 votes. Mary Beth Carrozza around a little over 8,000. And that was just in the primary. So I'm sure you faced this before. How do you overcome
5,900?
Yeah, right.
Right. Yeah, 59,000. We've been doing pretty good.
Oh, that's right, 5,900 rather. So how do you overcome that kind of?
Well, it's great when I'm out and talking. First of all, we're outside of the partisan lock-in on a primary. And when I'm outside every day, people come up and say, "Hey, Jim, how you doing? I'm voting for you." And I say, "Oh, that's great." They said, "No, you don't get it. I'm a Republican and I'm voting for you." So crossover is important. Independents are important. Holding on to our base is important, and earning people's confidence. So that's how we've been able to do it. That's how we're continuing to do it. Our constituency service is strong. Just yesterday, I was over here at the Extension office. Upwards of probably 75 farmers here talking about how challenging it's become with the deer population in their crops. So we're here. You go across full spectrum, healthcare, deer management, protecting agriculture, or commercial watermen, small business. So that's how we do it, and that's why we're here this morning. I want to ask people for their continued trust.
Well, let me turn to one of the things that your opponent has talked about is the gubernatorial candidate for Governor Ben Jealous. He has talked about a Medicare for all, and she, of course, says that she opposes this. Larry Hogan is the Republican incumbent, is described as Jealous as being socialist. How do you relate to the Democratic candidate for governor? I know Peter Franchot, the comptroller, a Democrat, has said he's not supporting anybody. How do you relate to that, Tom?
My focus, first of all, is my race, and right here on the district, the people of the Eastern Shore. Now, with all due respect, it's all about affordance. It's about affordance. I'm not here supporting Ben Jealous. I'm here. I've worked extremely well with Governor Hogan from the very first day. If you recall the PMT, on the very first day before he was done, he went ahead and repealed those regulations that were about to become very onerous to our poultry industry here. He and I have a very strong record, Governor Hogan and I. As late as yesterday, he came on as an ally for the next portion of the convention center expansion. We've done good things. School after Labor Day. We'll talk a little bit about his supplemental budget. I reached out to him and asked for Somerset County, making college more tuition, community college more affordable. So the governor and I have a strong working relationship. Number one. Number two, also I've proven that I've worked with any governor as we come in. As a matter of fact, it was Governor Hogan Governor Ehrlich with Governor Hogan as his appointment secretary, who appointed me. God bless Bennett Bosman when he passed. But then appointment secretary Hogan made the appointment recommendation to Governor Ehrlich, so I was appointed through him. So we have a long, good history. I look forward to working with him forward for the people of the Eastern Shore, but I have shown the opportunity, the ability, the efficiency of working with governors of both parties.
Well, let me ask you this. Are you simply staying out of the governor's race one way or the other in terms of support?
Yeah, I'm focused on my race, number one. And, of course, if Governor Hogan wants to come over and endorse me, that'll work, too. We can have that conversation.
In terms of your opponent, how do you assess your opponent? She's been described as very hardworking, has attempted to get as much as she could for her district as a delegate. How do you assess her?
Well, you can sort of say all the above and very ambitious. When you talk about about ambition. Ambition really has to be, I would say, managed with, getting the job done. When you take a look at the work that we've done, it's been all about relationships. You go full spectrum, whether it was the disparity grant here in Wycomico County, which is critically important, down to the needs of Somerset County, back to Worcester County and their needs, higher education, affordable pharmaceuticals, prescription drugs. I'm in a position where I'm a senior member on the Senate Finance Committee, so I think it's very, very important. When you look, you hear about bipartisan, but you work bipartisan. When I talk about where we're going in the future, I talk about working with everyone. Some people tell me, with all due respect, that when my opponent talks, they talk all about the governor. And with the governor respectfully this and the governor that. I work for the people of the Eastern Shore. That's what it's all about. So I'm not really here this morning to talk about my opponent, but I appreciate the opportunity to allow us to talk about our constituents' needs here on the shore.
Do you think you have an advantage as a Democrat in getting more for the district since the Democrats dominate the state legislature?
Well, clearly the majority is there, and the push is on, as you well know. The opposition is trying to change some of the math there, but clearly what's not going to happen is that the majority in Maryland is not going to change, nor are the relationships that I've built, both with Senate President Miller, my leadership, Speaker Bush in the House, and the governor. But the fact of the matter is we have a Democratic majority. I'm a solid, strong, conservative voice in that caucus. When we go in and we have our caucuses and they're talking about issues which are adversarial to us in rural areas, I stand up, and I've earned their respect. And I want to make certain that we keep that voice there, that we keep what we need and that strong voice in the Senate, and with that mutual respect over in the House. So, no, I do believe. And I do believe last-minute issues. Let's talk a few years ago when President Bell called me from down UMES. Sadly, they lost their PA accreditation, and they were on the verge of needing that the pharmacy school building. And the monies were supposed to be in the budget when the budget was presented, and when it came out that day, it wasn't there. And I got a panic call at about 10 minutes to 10, and just before I went onto the floor, and on my way into the floor of the Senate, I knocked on the Senate President's door, and I told him our dilemma. He knew what we were facing here at UMES. He knows how important these educational facilities are here. And I told him the situation. And by about 8 o'clock that night, he came and fetched me out of a meeting and said, look, don't worry, we got the monies. So that's important. That's important. Not only to give you a commitment, but to live the commitment.
By the way, how do you view the situation with the staffing at the Eastern Correctional Institution? I know there's been a call for 30 more, I think, officers or staffers there. I believe the state has now moved some of its efforts to get recruits to the Somerset County. How did the problems come about in that facility, and what's the solution? Is there simply more money?
There is a solution. First of all,
how did it happen? How do you think it happened?
Let me give you a little bit of the forensics of how it happened. But first of all, you asked how I feel about it. It's unacceptable. To those families, if we're waiting for a physical tragedy to happen, it's around the corner. I was there the day of whatever they want to call it, on June 21st, I believe the day was. I was there for 2.5 hours. I saw the faces of the medical staff that came out after they'd been there almost 20 hours. I saw the faces of up to 100 correctional officers that came out. And for almost 2 years, I'm on record with Governor Hogan, and I've been effective there, calling for this situation to be remedied. Now, how did it come about? It came about, some people say, because of the polygraph. First of all, we have to look at the whole comprehensive package. What are the pay? What is the pay? What are the benefits? This is a very dangerous occupation, and one that we really need the most. Yeah, we're doing things to make sure that we get second chances, adjustment, reinvestment, and the like. But still, in these facilities, we have some of the most dangerous people in the state of Maryland, and we're sending our neighbors. When ECI was founded, it was founded to be an asset for the people of Somerset. Now it's become anxiety. Now, how did it happen? You all know what happened in the Baltimore Detention Center, number one. The corruption that presented itself right here. And absolutely, through a hiring process, they felt that I was on that task force. We made a recommendation that you had to have a polygraph. The polygraphs have supposedly been the final no in the hiring. We have a significant number of applicants. They pass a written test. We've adjusted some of the scorings on the written test. And when we've gotten to the polygraph, allegedly, that is where we lose a very high percentage, maybe over 80% of our applicants. I truly believe that you can take a look at that. I believe that the integrity has to be tested, the trust has to be tested, but we have been told, and finally, after almost a year and a half, I was able to get a meeting with the Lieutenant Governor on July the 3rd. We went up and met with him to talk about this with some of the other members of the correctional administration, and we're told that this is the same test that's given to state troopers. This is the same test that's given in natural resources police. So when you hear this 4.5 and 5 hour test, they're alleging that these metrics are the same. But what happens, supposedly, I've not been administered the test or sat in a room and even listened to it secondhand, but when the candidates start to have troubles in certain areas, that induces another question and yet another question. And before you know it, this 2-hour test that supposedly our state trooper candidates or our natural resource candidates endure, it becomes a 3.5, 4.5 hour test. And the next thing you know, whether it's inconclusive or not, our candidates for correctional officers are rejected. Now, what has happened? I want to thank the families of the correctional officers. They started a Facebook page. They have had a very, very positive educational incentive to get out there and let the community know what's going on. So what has happened? I think that as the world has changed, there was a need to make sure that the integrity of the correctional officers was intact, but how far do you have to go with that? I believe that additional supervisory or probationary time, maybe more frequent trips if you get, when you first get hired, visiting with your supervisor. But I know for sure, and also, you know what we've lost there? We have lost our senior membership there. Our senior veteran correctional officers, when they've not felt safe, they made a decision, we're not doing this anymore. They're ready to come back. So I know there's opportunity to bring them back. I know there's other opportunities across the country. I know I brought a number of ideas to the Lieutenant Governor when we met, and I'm here to work with Governor Hogan and with the administration to get this right for one reason. The people, the families of the correctional officers and the families of Somerset County, where this was pledged to be an asset to that county. So it's not right, it's not acceptable.
Let me turn, by the way, to the offshore wind issue. When I was talking to your Republican opponent, she expressed concerns, obviously, about the tourism issue, but also talked about the idea that there were some current concerns about the marine fishery, particularly how it might affect them. And at one point I said, well, is it possible this thing won't be built at all? What's your position in terms of whether or not this should be built, and the concerns not only in terms of tourism but also in terms of the marine fishes?
Well, let's start off in the beginning. This bill was passed in 2013. I was on the committee, the Finance Committee, the Committee of Jurisdiction, and every concern that Ocean City, Assateague, everyone they had, industry, making sure the economic benefits were here. I was respectfully working with my colleagues on the committee and addressed that. Within the tolerances of interstate commerce, we made certain that the job opportunities would happen right here in Maryland, right here on the Eastern Shore. At no point did we ever trade the cow for the beans, that we ever say, oh, let's take offshore wind and leave tourism behind. Yes, in fact, and by the way, we put it up with the Quasi-Judicial Public Service Commission to make the final decision. This had to be proved when they had their finding of fact. It would be a net benefit for the Maryland ratepayer. And so when you got there on that day, there were 4 commissioners. 3 were appointed by Governor Hogan, and 1 was still an appointment from the previous administration. Guess what happened? They approved both unanimously. And they looked at the parameters. They looked at what they believed it was going to be a net positive to the Maryland ratepayer. We moved forward. Now, as the former mayor of Ocean City, that's where I live. I live right in town. And you think for a moment I want to do anything that's going to put us in jeopardy or in harm's way. So I know that we could continue to work on this. I respect the mayor's position. I understand it. If I were him, I would probably be concerned about it, quote, on my watch as well. But this now has gone beyond Maryland. It's gone beyond the quasi-judicial process, and now it's over in feds. So we got Bowen, Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, that's still involved in it. So there's still time. Now, will it ever be built? It comes down to, what's the pro forma look like for U.S. wind and deep water? Are the profit margins there? You talk about affecting the marine life. Look, in many ways, if you talk to Captain Monty Hawkins, artificial reefing has proved to be a great benefit in the propagation of our marine life. That's what was testified to. I'm not going to dismiss any one person. I know that we have our commercial watermen out there that I work very, very hard for to keep in that port in West Ocean City. But there's a practicality that goes forward, too, with progress. I believe that this is something that will work. And I look forward to working for compromise to make it work.
One of the other issues, obviously, is education and the Board of Public Works. Your opponent opposes the change from the three-member panel making decisions about school construction, the mayor, comptroller, and the state treasurer. What is A, your position, which I know you've talked about before, and B, how do you expect the new panel that's being created to impact education here on the Eastern Shore?
Well, that's what it's all about, what you just said, here on the Eastern Shore. I want to make sure that our needs are addressed here. Look, let's be honest. I've had the privilege to be, whether it was the mayor or in the House of Delegates or on the City Council going fish pow, to work with the Board of Public Works. That's supposed to be a place where you go and you feel confident and you present your needs. Many times with the process, there was a real anxiety. I won't name names, but there were some local superintendents here that would call on the phone and say, you think we're going to be all right tomorrow? I said, what are you talking about? Well, we're concerned that we're going to get there and we're going to get grilled over this or that. I said, that's not going to happen. And I would make the call. But, Don, that's not what's supposed to happen. When you're here, we go in front of the Board of Public Works for our needs. We go for our children. The most important asset that we can endow upon our children is their education. So that atmosphere, A, was not acceptable, number one. Number two, we wanted to make sure that we were able to best provide those that understood the needs of the students of the Eastern Shore. I feel that this new arrangement will be quite that. So yes, I voted to make those changes. I clearly voted as the time went on to sustain those changes, and I believe in what it's going to be. And I believe as we get those folks in place, we're going to have a strong voice for the Eastern Shore that understands our needs as the 21st century and beyond goes forward. The school construction of today, yes, absolutely must be safe. We see the heinous acts that happen. This bill wasn't just about that. This bill was about making schools safer. This school was about making it. This school bill reorganization was about making schools more conducive to learning. I have one of the folks over here in the technical school in Wicomico County. It says, hey, look, I go out to Ohio and I see a new brand, a new way, an open classroom, how we can do this. So that's what this was all about, and I stand by the vote.
Turning to health care, obviously the state is bracing for any changes that happen to the Affordable Care Act at the federal level. There's talk about now at least looking at reinsurance. The Democratic candidate for governor has talked about a Medicare for all in Maryland. What do you see as a solution to ensuring that Marylanders have adequate health care no matter what happens to the ACA? And what about this idea of Medicare for all in the state of Maryland?
Well, this all-payer system, quite frankly, for all is not something I can support at this time. It's vastly expensive, number one. Number two, making sure, you said reinsurance. Where we really have to make the difference, which we did, and we did that this year, was making sure that the individual market is stable. That is where the volatility has been in the individual market. Large groups, small groups have had a stability. Our individual market has been very erratic. We did that this year with legislation. We're going to stabilize that because I want to make certain that early detection in so many diseases, making sure that you have your regular doctor's visits and all, is affordable and it's accessible. And then once that happens, I want to make sure that prescription drugs are affordable. Too many people, when I first became the mayor, I was 45 years old. and I got my honorary AARP card. I got the real thing now. I got the real thing. So I'm a stakeholder here. I want to make sure that as we go forward, our citizens, whether they're newborn children, our senior citizens, I want to make sure that this is a place they continue to build their families, that they call home, but they don't have to make decisions between their prescription drugs and other aspects of their life that are critically important. Can you imagine sitting there and having to decide whether you're going to not take your medicine or cut your pill in half? So just as important as health insurance affordances, so is prescription drug care. That's why I voted to support the generic bill 2 years ago that was just recently by the federal court deemed as not acceptable. They're
Right.
taking a review of that. That's why I worked this year to have that commission, prescription drug commission, and I'm going to work again on that bill as we go forward. I'm looking forward to going back in 2019 when you talk about, we've hit it right here. We've talked about education. We've talked about health care. We've talked about prescription drugs. We've talked about opportunity and building families on the shore. These are things that I have a solid, strong, effective record of working with Governor Hogan, of working with the General Assembly, and whatever the future may hold, the most important thing is working with our citizens for the needs of the Eastern Shore, regardless who's in the governor's mansion or who's in the General Assembly. I'm asking our listeners today to continue to have faith and trust in me. I'm asking them for their vote as we can go forward and continue to represent them effectively as we have.
One of the things that your opponent is she does a sort of this end of the year review and talks about a lot of the things that got accomplished under Governor Hogan, whether it's money for the J.M. Taws Technology Career Center or the West Salisbury Elementary School or the Salisbury Downtown Revitalization and so on. How much of it do you see her being important to that as opposed to yourself?
Well, first of all, I would not dismiss anybody, when they take a pledge for public service. That's never been my style. But I could tell you respectfully, yes, the governor's leadership is there. The governor signs the bills. We take the leadership and we go forward. We can go across the spectrum. We already talked a little bit about UMES. You look here at Salisbury University. You look at our pre-K through 12. You look at the schools. You look at the school construction program that we have down in Worcester. And then you turn around, you look at business incentives, getting rid of the dispensary in Worcester County, which put significant money back in play in the hospitality industry, or school after Labor Day, or farming that we've already talked about. These pieces of legislation, I got a whole bunch of them right here. We can go right down. that honestly, I've been able to sponsor. I've been able to sponsor in a bipartisan way with leadership from Western Maryland, the George Edwards, Republican George Edwards, Crossfile, Carl Anderton, right here out of the district. So, this is about a team effort. And yes, the leadership of the governor has been solid as we've gone through. But with all due respect, and I say with modesty, my leadership has been tremendous. And each year our success rate gets better in the General Assembly, and we continue to go forward. Now as a senior member in Senate Finance, and we go back. Look, I lost my chairman on primary day. And he was one of the, as they say, the last working farmers in the Maryland General Assembly. I have to make sure that I sustain that voice, as I talked about in that caucus. I sustain that voice effectively. So, this is about being accomplished. People know me. I don't stay in any one office too long. And I've been there to work for the people. I continue to do that going forward. So as we go, yeah, it's great to work with the team. I'm going down from here. We're going to walk with Governor Hogan on the boardwalk. And as I said earlier, I really thank him as an ally coming in for that convention center project down there. So we've done a lot of good things. We've worked well together. I've supported every one of his nominations. I'm on the Executive Nominations Committee, the subset, and it's really great to be there, the subset of the Senate, when you have a new administration and you have the Secretary of the Environment or Transportation. They come and you have a conversation to earn your vote as a member, my vote, and it gives you that relationship to build for the needs of our people here on the shore. So it's a great composite of leadership. That's what we've been able to achieve. That's what I'm looking to sustain. but I need your listeners' vote to do that, and I asked for it this morning.
So it's always been close. Is it going to be close this time?
Absolutely. If one's a landslide, we're working to get all the rest and then get that one. And folks out there, I ask for your continued support. But we take nothing for granted. And people know they call me night or day, and I'm there. Constituency service is really the most important. Legislation is certainly our policy, but constituency service. I'll kind of end it here. I was over at the Wacomico Yacht Club, the boat docking competition they had. The fellow came up to me and he introduced himself and his significant other, and they said, "We want to thank you." And as they got ready to say, they both teared up. And I remember the call. It was this winter. They had a teen. We'll leave it at that had significant behavioral health issues, and really had found what they thought was going to be a road to violence, whether it was against them or against themselves. And we jumped right into action, and before the night was over, we found a pathway. Those are the type of things, they're not written down as bill numbers, but they make a difference in people's lives. When you have an elderly family member that needs hospice care or really needs a second opinion, things just aren't working out, and you're able to show and help and lead them there, that's why I do what I do, and that's what this is all about.
We've been speaking with State Senator Jim Mathias. He is up for, of course, re-election. His Republican challenger is Delegate Mary Beth Carrozza. We appreciate you stopping by and chatting with us this morning.
Thank you, Don. Have a great weekend, and you and everyone out there.
This has been Delmarva Today. I'm Don Rush. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for watching Delmarva Today, a production of Delmarva Public Radio. Production and audio engineering by Chris Rank. Hosted by Don Rush. For podcasts, visit delmarvapublicradio.net or subscribe to the Delmarva Today podcast on iTunes. Delmarva Today can now be seen on Pack 14.